Not just you, Brian Griffiths, where are you sitting? Right, let's hear your question.
Working families of Fleetwood are struggling in substandard housing and going hungry. Should asylum seekers be living in a rent-free hotel in Blackpool?
Right, let's deal with this.
The short answer, Brian, is that they shouldn't be, and we do need to get a grip on this. And it's really important to understand, I think, some of the reasons why this is happening. The first thing to say on your point, sir, on the why can't we turn the boats round in the Channel, is that we all start from a position, I think, where we would like to see that happen. When I was in Cabinet, the advice that was given by the authorities, including the Navy, was that forced turnarounds of these dinghies, overcrowded, packed with women and children, would lead to excess death in the sea.
Hang on, let him answer. He's answering your question. Let him answer.
And whilst I totally accept that obviously the gangs driving these crossings are heedless of the risk to human life, that was the position of the British authorities. What we really need to do, though, is to address the incentives that drive people here. And that means we need to have serious reform of our asylum laws, and it means we need, I think, to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, which has been roundly abused, time after time, to mean that British courts are unable to get rid of people who have no earthly right to be here on any sensible basis. And we see it in all sorts of manifestations. It obviously goes wider than just the asylum seeker conversation. It goes to our inability to deport many foreign criminals. But it is simply farcical that between now and 2029, on the government's own figures this week, we'll spend somewhere in the region of £12.5 billion on asylum seeker accommodation. That is money which should be being spent in this country, or not spent at all and given back in the form of tax cuts.
I mean, that was being spent under... when you were in government as well.
Yes.
So it's hardly a new problem. I mean, how did you let that happen?
Yeah, well, my very clear wish was that we should take very robust action on the human rights settlement, which I believe is, at the moment, being abused in a way which the founders of the treaties in the 1950s could never have imagined, to set our ability to have a safe and secure sovereign border at naught. And until we get real with that, then we're not going to resolve this problem. That's why I am very pleased Kenny Badenoch's set up the commission, which will look at how we do this, because it is a important and complex question, and we'll report back this September.
Darren, so one of the things Rachel Reeves announced yesterday, which I'm not sure anyone was expecting, was that there will be no asylum seekers being housed in hotels by 2029. How on earth are you going to do that when the number of asylum seekers coming over the Channel, which is a small number of the people, I have to say, claiming asylum overall, most of those have overstayed their visas, but that number is going up. How are you going to achieve this?
So one of the problems that we've inherited coming into government was a huge number, it's true, was a huge number of people in hotels waiting for a decision. There was a backlog of people being paid to stay in hotels because the last government didn't take decisions on their asylum claims. That's why the bill is so high. So we're working through those now at pace. If you are not entitled to stay here, you have to go back where you came from.
Can I just ask you on that point, because that's what you said, that's what you've said, and I'm sure that, Zia, that's what you will say as well. But there are countries that just won't take people back.
There are some...
There was quite a few. I mean, for example, Robert Jenrick was quoting Iraq, Somalia, Ethiopia, Iran, I believe. They are not prepared, on the whole, there may be some exceptions, to take people back. Look, so where are they going to go?
Yeah. Look, there are some of those cases, and they are difficult, but it is the minority of people currently waiting, which is why we've done returns agreements with countries and why we've returned over 20,000 people who do not have the right to claim asylum here. It is right that we're cancelling the use of asylum hotels, because that's not how we should be paying taxpayers' money. But on the other side of the coin, can I just say something which I'm sad to say I think is now controversial in our political debate? I did a visit to the Border Security Command in Dover a few weeks ago to see what we were doing to process these applications, to return people that are not allowed to be here, to make sure that you're catching people trying to come in when they shouldn't come in. But let me tell you, when you're there on the site, seeing these dinghies put together by these organised criminal gangs, which are clearly not safe, and when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies, and women who have been...
No, they're not.
No, you have got to take... No, look, I get this is...
North of 90% of them are adult men.
Let me be... No.
Hang on, And you're saying that's not true?
No, look, this is why it's
you just said it's
controversial.
not true. Is it true or
I'm
not?
saying it's not true. And I'm saying that this is controversial for a reason, and it's not. You're told not to challenge the audience on question time, but I'm going to. So let me tell you this story. When there are babies and children put into that position by human trafficking gangs who are coming across in the channel with skin burns from the oil from those boats mixing with the salt seawater, I would ask any of you to look at those babies and children and say, go back where you came from. It is right that we are there to help them. It is right that we are a country that respects our human rights obligations, but it is also right that we should have a border that is functioning and an immigration system that is functioning. It was left out of control by the last government.
You know they're coming from
and we're
France,
going to go.
right? You know they're
we're going to
coming
be
from
taking
Hang on, dear, I'll
control
come
of
to
it
you in a
again. It's right that we take a humanitarian response for those people who are put in those positions, and as the government's policy states, dealing with the criminal gangs who are exploiting vulnerable children to use that route, and then tackling the people who should not be using it and making sure that they're not staying in this country. You can do both of those things without politicising it in the way that you do.
Zia.
Well, in my previous answer, I made the case that this government prioritises foreign citizens over citizens of the United Kingdom. After that testimony, I can rest my case.
How do you rest that case?
So
Make the
number
case.
one, well, you were just talking about it. So
No, you make the case.
number one, the vast majority of the people making the journey from France by small boat are fighting age, military age males, and not women and children. That's the first point. And I don't know if the BBC real-time fact checkers are working this evening or not. They seem to be when I speak, but let's see. That's the first point. The second point I would make is that, we're talking about asylum hotels, and Rachel Reeves saying we're going to shut down asylum hotels. There was a report today that this Labour government is not only renting hotel spaces, they're actually going to buy hotels at the taxpayers' dime. Can you just categorically deny that that is the case? That this government, this Labour government, is spending taxpayers' money purchasing hotels in order to house illegal immigrants and asylum seekers?
We own government...
Well, yes,
I'm answering your question. We own government-owned temporary accommodation for when people are waiting for a decision. That is true. But
So you're not buying any more?
well, we've had to buy some to get out of hotels,
Sure.
but it's temporary accommodation. It's cheaper to do it that way. But look, when you say that this means that the government is prioritising foreigners over the British people, you have to explain what you mean by that.
Okay, let me explain what I mean. I spent many weeks in the constituency of Runcorn and Helsby. Runcorn is a very deprived area. And do you know the issue that exercised people so much and why you lost that seat with the massive swing to Sarah Pochin? The reason is primarily because of HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. So not the actual hotels. In an unholy alliance of Serco and Yvette Cooper, the Labour Home Secretary, illegal migrants are being deposited into communities where there's no say for the local people about it, people from alien cultures. There's a lot of crime as a result of this. And what takes this to Bond-villain levels of wickedry, there are Section 21 eviction notices being given to British tenants, including, and in my inbox I have examples of veterans, including one who is suffering PTSD, who received a Section 21 eviction notice because Serco, at the behest of the Home Office, at the behest of Keir Starmer, is offering 5 to 7 year contracts, 20 to 30% above market rates, to house illegal migrants and asylum seekers. And as a result of that, British people are being turfed out onto the street. There's nothing about that that's remotely acceptable, and it's why the social contract in this country is hanging by a thread.
So Zia, just be clear, because one of the things that your boss Nigel Farage has talked about is sending, if they come over on a boat, and you refer to it, Simon, if people come over in a boat, you turn it around and dump them back on the beach in France. Practically,
Impossible.
how would that happen? How would you persuade the French government to accept that?
Well, number one, you might ask them what they're doing with the £400 million of British
No, I'm asking you a different question. How would you persuade the French government to accept that?
Well, I just answered you. The first thing I would say is, can we have our money back, please? That would be the first point.
How would
The
you
second
persuade the
point-
government to
So listen, there's a number of points here to be made. Firstly, you have to take away the incentive. That I agree with. You have to leave the ECHR. That I agree with. It'll never happen under the Tories. There's a reason it never happened is because the vast majority of Tory MPs
Hang
are
on.
against
I've asked you a
doing it.
question here. Please answer. How would, it's a central part of
Sure.
your policy, as I understand it, you turn the boats around and deposit the people back on the beach in France, and France would just have to swallow that.
Yeah.
How would you persuade them to do that?
Well, listen, I will say this. if the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is unwilling to have an extremely difficult conversation with the leader of France about the sovereignty of our territory, which is basically being overwhelmed and overrun on a daily basis as a result of the Channel, I don't know about what the Prime Minister would be willing to have a difficult
Okay,
conversation.
so you don't know if you've been managed to persuade them or not. You can't be sure. Let's